Okay, so hi everybody. Hi Wolf. Hi Sandra. As
Yes,
everybody
hello.
knows, Peter Litchfield, and Wolf and Sandra are on the board of the nonprofit entity Breathing Science Inc. And we're here every week, not every week, but every session. And so we're very glad to be here today. We're going to be talking about something quite different, quite interesting indeed. We're going to be hearing from Wolf himself, who has been a musician a lot of his life. He played the trumpet or plays the trumpet. And he did, as he tells me, develop some breathing issues as a result of learning to be a trumpet player. And so we're going to be talking about breathing as it pertains to musicians. That includes both musicians that play instruments, in particular wind instruments, and people who sing. We're going to talk about both of those things, both from a standpoint of science and its application. And mixed with that will be Wolf's personal background around music. He's currently working with people at the Music and Arts University of the city of Vienna. He is in Vienna, Austria. I'm sure you already know that. And that organization originally was the Conservatory of Vienna, but now it's become a university. And he's been involved with musicians there since 2019, working with their breathing. So I think that we'll have a interesting and perhaps surprising conversation. I'm not sure what to expect myself. I'm sure I'll have a lot of questions, and Sandra will also.
I
I
love
like
good surprises.
Wolf smiling. That's great. That's a good start. So why don't we turn it over to Wolf to begin?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I mean, yeah, music brings people together, right? That's one of the things, and it was bringing us in a way together, Peter. If you remember, the first time where we were meeting in person was at the conference that was entitled "The Music of Breath," and it was held in Austria. So, of course, we in Austria and in Vienna in particular have a reputation for being immersed in music.
For sure.
And and yeah, I'm happy to share a few things that I've learned from working with musicians, but I have encountered in being a musician or playing a brass instrument or a wind instrument myself. And it's interesting, Peter, because uh, there is problems that might result from playing a wind instrument or singing. And at the same time, what I've seen so many times is that people sing and play those instruments because it's good for them from a physiological perspective. So when I measure them, I see, okay, when they play their instrument, their CO2 levels are better, their autonomic nervous system regulation is better. They really thrive when they're doing it. And so there's all kinds of things that happen when people play instruments, and all kinds of things that happen when people play instruments at a very high level, at the professional level. Because then there are some challenges involved that might not appear when you just play for fun or just for social purposes. So I'm looking forward to your questions, and I can share. Maybe I start out by sharing a little bit of my own story around how breathing and music came together in my life, and what role it plays in my work about breathing these days. And then I might talk a little about challenges and things that are particularly interesting for musicians or artists or singers or people who are dancers or things like that. So So I can share some things that I discovered in working with this particular audience. So my background is that I had violin lessons when I was in elementary school for several years, and then I gave it up for whatever reason. And I when I was at high school, I became interested in playing the trumpet. My father was playing the trumpet at home, and I had a friend at school who was always sharing how excited it is to play the trumpet. So I just decided at that late stage of my life, because most of the time you start learning a musical instrument very early, to play the trumpet. And looking back, for me, it was a pivotal shift in my personal development as well, because it involved controlling my breathing. And not in a negative way, but in a way that I was becoming more aware of my breathing, and that is something that I find always when I work with musicians. That sometimes people are not aware of their breathing. Musicians, or at least people who play wind instruments, are always aware, or almost always aware of their breathing. So they also do, like, very often they do breathing exercises, or they use techniques, right? So if in the general population there is, probably a very low percentage that does breathing techniques or whatever on a regular basis, musicians, singers, or wind instrument players, they do. So and then I became like a semi-professional trumpet player for some time, and then I went to university and I dropped it. But then I got also more immersed in music when I was doing my PhD. So I was spending maybe 10% of my awake time at the opera buildings of Vienna, because I would, go and queue for standing area tickets 2-3 times a week, and I would do some proofreading of my PhD there, and I would spend a lot of time watching opera, watching ballet, and that was already the time when I started being very interested in breathing and doing certain kinds of breathing training before I started working in breathing science. But yes, I mean that for me, breathing and music was very closely related, also because one of the reasons why I got interested in breathing was that I realized that I'm lacking stability in my diaphragm. And that's one of the things that is very often a challenge for not just for trumpet players, for all kinds of wind instrument players, because it's related to what I refer to as the exhalation paradox that wind instrument players and singers encounter. And that idea of that paradox is that actually the exhale is passive. We know that, right? So the exhale is from a muscular point of view should be active. At the same time, as I'm talking to you right now, or when I play, for anybody who plays a wind instrument, or for anybody who sings, they are in a way active when they perform. So is it active or is it passive? What's happening there? So that's why I refer to it as a paradox.
You're talking about the exhale. Is it passive or active?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I remember, because I remember I was before I even started being involved in breathing science, I was doing a 1-week workshop with a body worker, with 2 women. One was a body worker, like a rolfing practitioner, and one was a musician. And at some point they were explaining to us that the inhale is passive and the exhale is active. And I was like, whoa, what's going on here? Isn't that the other way around? And they were explaining to me, no, look at this ball. We were working with the fascia, and they were showing to me one of those balls that we were using. And they were showing to me the ball, and they were saying, squeeze it. And then it comes back to its natural, back to be round and nicely shaped. And that's when we inhale, right? So when we inhale, we reach, we are active, and then we come to a point where we are balanced. So
That's very
that,
interesting. I never
so
knew that.
and,
Never ever thought of that.
yeah,
Fascinating.
it's very fascinating. And
That's if the relaxation is on the inhale side, then
right,
you just allow the inhale
right.
rather than the other way around. That's fascinating. Go ahead.
It's fascinating. Yeah, I'm loving that too, Wolf, because it also touches on the whole concept of what you're sharing here on air pressures and using your body as an instrument while you're playing the instrument. But how do you access your body as an instrument effectively so you don't overdo or injure? So I'm very
Right,
curious as to what comes next.
right, right. And you're, I mean,
That in itself is worth our session today for me to have learned that. Fascinating. I have to really think about that. Go ahead.
and Sandra, you're pointing at something that I want to talk about a little more later, which is the
Okay, I'll be
relation with
patient.
body.
Yeah,
Sorry, yeah,
I'll be
because that
patient.
is also very interesting.
Yeah,
But let's stick with this idea of the exhalation paradox, and that
yes.
the inhale is passive and the exhale is active. Because from talking with I only later I discovered why that would make sense to anybody. Right?
Mhm.
And I think the idea is that when you feel like the inhale is something that is happening because of the reflex or because of the extended exhale, right? So you're kind of the exhale is something where you have to do something, where you have to be creative. And then at some point there is a reflex or this strong incentive to breathe that might translate in the interpretation that the inhale is passive because it's happening to you, and the exhale is passive because when you
Well,
exhale, you're creating whatever you are creating. You're creating vibration. You're creating music, right?
one thing that's important there is that for people to understand that the inhale can be allowed. It's not something that when we say we normally think of as being active, we don't mean that you are the person taking the breath. It's the body that takes the breath. You allow the inhale. The problem
Right.
becomes when you assist the inhale, then you start to get into trouble. The idea is to allow that inhale. So what they're pointing out is that the inhale is active, is passive from the standpoint of allowing it. It's still
Right.
active. Obviously, when you take a breath, you're using muscles to do this. You're not relaxing muscles. So it's an activity, but it's
Mhm.
something you're allowing. And that is really the key in there, is that the relaxation is on the inhale side, which means you're just allowing the system to take over at that point. And that's so important to understand. So it's a paradox on the one hand, but it's not on the other hand, because when you allow it, you know, and it's active and you're allowing it, that
Mhm.
is not the same as taking a breath. So that's so
Right.
important, that differentiation. But you
Right,
can
Peter.
learn
But
that as a musician. You can learn that as a musician.
right. But the interesting thing is become then the effects on the nervous system, right? Because one of the aspects is then to have an exhale that is the least active as it can be, and no more than that. So, for example, I was talking about that at length with one of the musicians from the um, uh, Vienna Symphonic Orchestra, he's playing the clarinet, and he is very very aware that if you put too much pressure, right, if you make the exhale too active, right, then you're in trouble. So
And
it's
now you
really
make
about,
the exhale too active?
right.
Yeah, okay.
So it's
Well,
about,
can we go back to the inhale for a second? You said that you don't want to, allowing the inhale to occur, you don't like try to get more air. You just allow the inhale to come to a point
right.
where it's going to come. And this is kind of fits in with a myth that a belief I've always had that these wind instrument players have to take a deep breath. And what you're saying is they do not take a deep breath. What they do is they allow the system to operate, automatically, normally, some people call naturally, where those
Right.
reflexes are operating, where you take a certain amount of air. You're not the one doing it, but your body's doing it. And then you go from there with your exhale.
Yeah.
Very
Right.
different, very
Thing,
interesting.
the thing is also very different when talking about what instrument. So if we talk about the trombone, for example, it's different than talking about the clarinet or the oboe or talking about the trumpet, for example. So there is also some differentiation in this respect. But what it led me to this paradox uh, is that what I often do with musicians when I work with them, and I don't have so much time to work with them because I don't have so many teaching hours at the university, but is I teach them to to allow the exhale, to make the exhale passive. And I can just show you two screenshots as an example if you want to see that.
Sure.
Um, where I was doing that. So this is a musician that suffers from exhaustion, that suffers from chest pain regularly. Um, and what you see is a screenshot. This first one here is a screenshot from the Capno Trainer software, where you see at the lower part the Capno the Capno Trainer Go, the Capnogram, and in the middle part you see there are our intervals. You see the interbeat intervals of the heart. And at the very top, you see the fast Fourier transformation. So you see already an analysis of the state of the nervous system. And
Yeah,
here,
so just so everybody out there knows where this is heart rate variability analysis, and that upper graph there, you're looking at different frequencies there. The red is a very low frequency, and the blue is a high frequency. Anyway, it's a FFT, if you will, of the heart rate variability, and that has everything to do with looking at autonomic arousal and so on. So he's really making reference here to autonomic arousal while looking at breathing on the lower graph, where you can see that red line there. The idea is that you want to be, when you exhale, your carbon dioxide level is above that red line. And that's good because you want it to be high enough to
right.
do its job. And so it
Yeah.
looks good. The bottom graph looks like the respiration, and that's really CO2 is about respiration. It looks like respiration is optimal there because this person is breathing above that red line when they exhale. It's very good. So then I just wanted to make sure they understood that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. Yes, and I will talk a little bit about that later about problems with our respiration versus problems with the nervous system, because that's very interesting. That's a very interesting thing in musicians. So you see, I was saying the challenges are exhaustion, the challenge is chest pain. So the exhaustion is I have no indication that the exhaustion would be the result of hypocapnia, so the result of poor breathing chemistry. So where does it come from, right? So it had
Poor
maybe,
respiration would be a nice way to say it, where respiration is compromised.
yeah. So one of the reasons where it might come from is the way, that is breathing mechanics that creates a lot of arousal, like Peter was saying, autonomic arousal, a lot of sympathetic drive, you might also call it. And that's actually what you see in this very tiny graph already. So if you look at the breathing in this first, I don't know if you can see my cursor.
We
So
can.
if you see,
Yeah, I can.
can you? Okay, so I show you here these first couple of minutes where you see that the breathing mechanics is very irregular, right? And 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 you see also, and then we were doing this exercise with the passive exhale, allowing the exhale, dropping into the exhale, and you see how the breathing becomes much more regular, and also the system of the HRV signal becomes more regular. And you see here in this frequency analysis, I'm not going into the details, I'm just stating that what's happening is that this person is switching to a more balanced state of the nervous system. So allowing and dropping it, making the exhale passive might really be something, a crucial skill to learn for this person. And in the second screenshot, it's just, I'm zooming into this part where the person is allowing the exhale and making it passive. And you see this green area here it's becoming much more important and much bigger, which indicates a very well balanced nervous system. So not like the sympathetic drive that we were seeing before, that might have a very important part in the exhaustion that this musician is encountering.
Hey, Wolf, is that person in that data, were they doing something musically during the data or not?
No,
Just curious. Okay.
no. So I was over the time. So I've been working there for like 7 years so far, and I've done
Mm-hmm.
various things. So I've done stage training with them, where I was measuring them, when they practice, when they perform on stage. So we were doing like a real. We were doing. We were creating the audience. We were creating a stage setting, and
Mm-hmm.
we were having all kinds of data of them. But in
What do
this
you mean by
case,
stage? When a stage, who's on the stage? What kind of stage setting are you making reference? When I think of stage, I'm thinking of theater, play,
right. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of very often wind instruments are having a leading role in an orchestra, or uh,
Mhm.
they perform on stage, which means they are
I
like
see.
in a very very small group of musicians, or so it's not their regular work environment that they disappear somewhere in like they do in the opera sometimes.
Yes,
So
down below the orchestra
right,
at a lower level. Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
So that's what the one thing that I find interesting, this exhale paradox. And another thing that most people would associate with music and breathing is like we were already seeing data about the nervous system. Very often with musicians, I see good respiration. It's not always the case, obviously. I've had, for example, one student who's playing the Viennese horn, and he was hypocapnic to the extent that when he was, like Peter again, he was going to stage for playing a solo, and
Mm.
when he would come back from stage, so when he would leave the stage, he wouldn't be able to remember what happened on stage, and uh, that was because of the hypocapnia, and that was
Again, just
because of the
reminding the audience that hypocapnia is low carbon dioxide levels. Yeah.
right. So that was of the dysregulation of the breathing chemistry that that happened to him, or that was occurring when he was on stage. And he was writing his bachelor thesis, so I was his bachelor thesis supervisor, and he overcome that, and that made, of course, all the difference for him, in the sense of he becoming able to really experience his profession in a completely different way, in a joyful and empowering way, rather than in a way that he would be so scared about having to go on stage every single time. So you can imagine that. So what I'm just trying to say is that there can be problems with respiration and with oxygen and blood sugar supply to the tissue that have profound impacts on the capacity of a musician to do his job. I don't see that so often.
Which capacity? Or you do or you don't see
I
this
don't see that
capacity,
so
heart
often.
capacities. Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen that, but I haven't seen that so often. What I see really frequently is challenges around stage fright and performance anxiety.
Mm.
That is something.
I was told. I was skiing one time in Colorado, and I met this woman who was on the board of directors of the New England Conservatory of Music, which is the largest conservatory in North America. In fact, she was out there involved in a project where they were raising $500 million. They were, just to give you an idea of the immensity of the organization and what they were doing. And when she found out about, respiration and overbreathing and the loss of carbon dioxide and its effects, she was just flabbergasted, because she said, this is an immense problem. Performance anxiety in music is, although a gigantic issue, they don't talk about it. They're afraid to talk about it because it's considered to be a personality disorder. And you never want to let anyone know that you suffer with performance anxiety. A real no-no to tell anybody. And then she told me that the director of the conservatory himself had a real serious problem with performance anxiety in music, but nobody knows, because I was a stranger and I'm not a musician, and so she could mention it to me. But she just got extremely interested and essentially looking not just at breathing in music, but looking at respiration and how the way you breathe may be compromising it, and how that can bring on or exacerbate performance anxiety or trigger it. I mean, if you get disoriented and you can't remember what you just did on stage like you remembered, that's going to produce a lot of anxiety by itself, just wondering what's wrong with you. Your sense of self shifts, and your self-confidence can go out the window. Okay. And so then when we start to try to take control of a situation, one of the things that people turn to a lot is breathing, where they take control of the breathing, unlike what we've been talking about previously here around what you do in music and allowing the inhale and all of that kind of thing. You get disturbed breathing from the perspective of compromising respiration. You get these symptoms. They don't know what the symptoms are. They don't understand them. But then that exacerbates the anxiety, as well as the fact that there's what we call cortical disinhibition. So you get a triggering of emotion. So you get physiological triggering of emotion, which then combines with the performance anxiety that's there for other reasons. Now you get into a vicious circle. Like I knew a guy who he had a music school, and a piano school, and the people who played the piano often had problems reading the music when they were performing. And so he started to measure their carbon dioxide levels and found that these people there, when they were on stage, their CO2 levels would drop. And as a result, they found it very difficult to focus on whatever they were doing. And so you get into a kind of a vicious circle pattern of things. And so that was a real shock to this woman from the conservatory, just understanding now that the way people learn to breathe can have a very profound effect, exacerbating the issue that so many people are concerned with, but are afraid to talk about even. I mean, the first step is to feel free to talk about it, before anything else.
Right.
It's almost like it is in Europe, at least it was for a long time, where when people were seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist, they would come in at a time they could be in the waiting room so no one would see them. So they would never be in the waiting room at the same time with somebody else. It's that kind of attitude on the part of people in the profession of music is what I was told by this woman. Anyway, what I'm saying, does that ring a bell for you? Is that consistent with your knowledge or?
I mean, yes. I mean, performance anxiety can trigger overbreathing, and that creates all kinds of problems, of course, in a situation where you have to be perfectly functional, right?
Yeah,
Where you
I
have
think so.
to be at your best, right? But it
Yeah.
goes beyond that. So even if that doesn't happen, even if there is no problem, like no breathing chemistry problem, there is this what I refer to as emotions paradox, and that goes one step further, I think, because uh, because emotions are an important necessary ingredient in being on stage, right? In performing and in interpreting what has been, proposed by a composer to be, to be a piece of art. And then, so you want to be in a situation where you're connected with your emotions, where you're connected with your body, and at the same time, when there is performance anxiety, uh, you want some amount of control, right? So you want your emotions and you want control at the same time. You want to be free and you want to be in control.
Well, it would seem to me,
So
I'm not a musician, but it would seem to me that, the emotion you're feeling has everything to do with how you're playing your music.
exactly,
If
exactly.
you're
So so
excited and there's meaning in
right.
what's happening, you want to be able to
Uh,
feel that meaning that
yeah.
then comes into the music. Absolutely.
I had another student who was writing his master thesis with me and about health of musicians. And we were having one question about how the students deal with their, with their anxiety, and if they take medication or they drink alcohol, whatever, how they manage it. And you would be really surprised how many students, already um, take, for example, also beta blockers. And this is something that really dumbs down your capacity to be in an emotional state. So I once talked with a teacher who teaches the flute there, and she says, I was once playing on a beta blocker, and it was killing me because I was trying to be, in playing, and the beta blocker was regulating me down. So I was feeling like I was kind of exploding inside. So I was not capable of playing the way I wanted to play and express whatever I wanted to express. So
So
this is a very
how do you find that music, that breathing can then contribute to, making that more, present, that
right.
the ability to access emotions to make that possible and present, and then the breathing facilitates all of that. What
Right.
have
And
you?
that's exactly the question, Peter. That is exactly the question. That's the crucial question there. How do you get that? Does breathing offer something there, or how can we facilitate that? Right? How can we get closer to that balance? And one of the things is that the relation of musicians with their body. Like before, when Sandra mentioned that, I was saying, okay, I want to talk about the relation of those people with their body. And if you have a relation where your body has to function, it's typically a negative relation. It's typically a relation where you're scared of yours in a way. because you don't
Or
want your body to let
you're
you
scared of
down.
your you're scared of your
Okay,
physiology.
right,
So does
right.
that
So
mean
when
does that mean that they stopped focusing on it because they're scared of it?
that might be one of the responses. But what I can tell you from me working with the students is that they come to me and they book a session with me in my class and they expect techniques. And when they realize that I'm trying to work on their relation with their body and use the breathing to build a bridge and understand that relation and improve that relation, they're kind of completely, they're kind of completely surprised. And they're also surprised of how much that can change within like a 45-minute session, right? When you bring the awareness and when you allow.
So
Mm,
awareness is really important in all of this.
right.
And so, but on the other hand, there's a fear that you mentioned that can be associated with that, like feeling your heart beating, for example. So is that
Yes.
something that a musician needs to work on so that rather than having fear around the physiology, there's a kind of enthusiasm around it where they're connecting with it in a way that as they interact with it, the changes in the physiology can facilitate what they're doing.
Right. That would be kind of turning it upside down, right? So you are taking the fear out of it and replacing it with an emotion that supports their connection with the body. Right.
Right. They
That can
become
be
more
something.
they become more integrated, let's say,
Right.
as a
Right.
result. And they can bring that hopefully in some way to the skills they have, to their music.
Yeah. Yeah. And this group of singers and wind instrument players, they are a pleasure to work with. Why? Because of their, all the time manipulating their breathing and working with their breathing. They are typically very good at, they have a very high level of breath control. So you tell them, breathe that way or let go of the exhale, and they just do it. Right? So I want to
Well, they
share
have that
another.
awareness that they develop as a musician.
Yeah, right, right. So I wanted to show you another example um, where a student shows me an intervention he uses, pace breathing. And I show you how that looks like.
I wanted, but as you're showing that, I wanted to just back up for a second because there was something that we were talking about earlier. I think it's really important to this is that we were talking about how the musician learns how to allow the inhale. And so, which is kind of the opposite of what most people think. You think of them taking a breath, and then, the exhale is the side where you allow. But what they've been doing is they allow the inhale, and then they become actively involved themselves in the exhale. But you were also just mentioning something about how there are problems that can come up around that. And allowing the exhale is something that's also important. So they're an expert at allowing the inhale, many of them. Learning to be an expert at exhaling is something else.
Right,
And so
right.
that's where they can get problems around the exhale.
There might result problems that result in overstimulation of the in sympathetic overstimulation.
Because you were also talking
Right?
about your own life and how you had some problems around
Uh,
reading the
I
music at one
I
time.
don't think that applied to my particular
Oh,
case.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. But I've seen that, and I think now that you're talking about it, I'm really becoming more aware of that also, and that's something to look out for.
Well, wasn't it you had
Um,
this particular problem, but I thought you mentioned to me one time that you did have some kind of struggle with music.
right,
I mean, the breathing
right.
in music. I wasn't talking about the exhale. I was just talking about whatever it was. that you were dealing with, which you don't want to go into now because you were about ready to bring something else
Yeah,
up
the
here. And I
suspense, the
want to go back to that.
suspense.
I want to take you further away. Let's go back to where you were.
We can talk about that later
Yeah.
if we have time to do that. I was just wanted to go to show you some more data. This example of a student that uses a paced breathing technique in order to relax and calm down. And he is, you can see maybe like, yeah, here, this first couple of minutes is just his his normal spontaneous breathing, and then he goes into this technique. And you see that this technique, this paced breathing technique, is bringing down, it's slowing down his breath, but it's also bringing down his CO2 values.
That's one thing I think, everyone out there should understand, that here's someone actually practicing something where they've reduced the breathing rate radically, but they've compromised respiration significantly. You see the drop in the CO2. So that reduced breathing rate, is not helping him in regards to his respiration. He's compromising his respiration while he's doing that. Anyway, I thought I'd mention that. Go
And
ahead. Yeah.
in addition to that, yeah, thanks, Peter, for pointing that out. And in addition to that, from the perspective of the nervous system, it's not balancing him, right? So it's increasing the sympathetic drive, which is represented here in the red part. So you see that this red thing is going up, right? It's lagged. This is like kind of a little lagged. So you see these while he's doing his paced breathing exercise, he's putting himself in a more alert, more sympathetic place than he was before, right? So I was
So it's
telling
working
him,
against him. It's working really against him.
right, it's in all
So in
respects,
every way, from a respiratory as well as an autonomic perspective.
right, right.
Yeah, I'm
So
wondering, Wolf, can you share when, I know it's just a short period of time here, given the number of breaths on your data graph there, but in that short period of time, did he report any kind of physiological changes that he noticed? Or if this is something he noticed all the time, or did
I
anything
think,
show up for him?
no, I don't remember the details.
Yeah.
The thing that I remember is that I kind of, for him, the way he breathes is reaffirming his emotional and physical state, right? Or
Mhm.
even making it more difficult.
Well, I'd like to
So
stop here for a
you're
second
really
because
looking,
what Sandra is
sorry,
saying is so important, is that, focusing on numbers is one thing, but the other part of it is to focus. What's so important in the work all of us do is to focus on what people are feeling and how they're experiencing it. And so what's you just described to me, Wolf, is really the motivation for why the person's doing it. It's making them, by taking over and doing the technique, they feel more in control. They feel more settled. That's why they're breathing the way they are. That's you say, well, why would someone want to do this if it's compromising respiration as well as autonomic function? Why are they doing it? Are they punishing themselves? No, there's a reinforcement there. There is an outcome of what they're doing that's powerful. And that's what will keep a dysfunctional habit in place, is that outcome, that, as in this case, where they then report to you that it makes them feel better, despite the fact that they're compromising respiration and disrupting autonomic function. Anyway,
But,
what
but
that's
Peter, on that note, given it's a university setting, if this client was a university candidate, there's also learning all these techniques possibly in an environment where they're doing something they're doing a technique that's supposed to be good for them. So even if they don't feel good, they may do it anyway because it's supposed to be good.
Well, that's another
So
kind of, they're
it's
doing what
another
they were
challenge.
supposed to do. That's another reinforcement. That's another
Yeah.
thing, an outcome that sustains behaviors all the time. You're doing it because you're
Yes.
supposed to, because I'm doing the
Mm,
right thing and I'm supposed to be learning and so
mm,
on, regardless of what the other outcomes associated with it might be.
mm,
Yeah, absolutely.
right. Right. And I mean, the fascinating thing is that, the aspired outcome is relaxation and recovery. And what we see is kind of a technique that, if properly applied, might even deliver that result. But he was just doing something that didn't do it for him. So I was just giving him some instructions for how he might adjust that paced breathing exercise. And look at what happened. This is here, from here starts, you can see that I see paced breathing 2 is worked PP2. And I gave him some instructions for how, basically some, allowing, making the exhale passive, allowing it, and, not inhaling to an extent that he feels he has to apply effort and all these kinds of things. And look what the result was. It was, the chemistry was very good. And also the autonomic response was very good. You see the green part here, how the sympathetic drive was coming down, and the balanced state of the nervous system appeared. So this is for me is also an example of how people who use breathing with the best intentions, but a lack of knowing what all the associated effects are and can be, might end up with. So the same exercise can deliver completely different results. And um, and then I was doing this, the dropping into the exhale. So we let go of the pacing, because he was so desperate for relaxation and recovery. So I was doing with him like dropping into the exhale. And he was carrying it that so perfectly that this person that was so kind of agitated, fidgeting next to me, sitting right to me, I was feeling him very, very agitated. Within 3 or 4 breaths, I was feeling him almost like very calm, very balanced. And he shared with me, he was falling asleep almost. So this is just
Well,
reaffirming this.
notice that his breathing rate speeded up a lot during that time.
It's here is where we were doing that dropping into
Oh,
the
I see.
exhale.
Oh,
Drops.
okay.
It
Mhm.
drops significantly.
Right.
So this is the first few minutes. I should have maybe worked on that screenshot before, but these 3 or 4, it only took him, because I was taking him out afterward. I was doing that with him 3, 4 breaths, or like you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 breaths. And that's what I mentioned, that this is a trumpet player, and he's so his level of breath control is so fascinating. He just does what you say, and if you say to him, "I'll make your exhale passive, drop into the exhale," he does it, and he falls asleep next to you within the matter of seconds, right? So he can really get into contact with his physiology and his level of tiredness. And that was really, really fascinating for me. So this is just a screenshot of the whole session, this last one. For those of you, I don't want to go into the details, but this is just for those of you who are familiar with the Kepner Trainer software and the data.
Some of what
So
you're
this,
describing, Wolf, it reminds me also of like when we were touching on peak performance training with athletes, because this is really very aerobatic, very athletic. It's performance, right? So it's very exciting how this could generalize to all kinds of aspects of
Is that the
life.
session that we did with
Or,
Dylan? Is that what you're referring to? One we did with
yeah,
Dylan? Yeah.
yeah, just performance in general. The last focus that you were discussing about you just tell him what to do and he can do it. This is what you see often, right, with athletes as well, because there's that kind of skill level. So that really can work in someone's favor. So it's great to see that in action in real time.
Mhm.
And it must be exciting for him or the client as well, because they can see, it's not that I'm not capable. I can. I just don't know what I need to do
Right,
to get
right.
there.
And that's so nice for me to work with these people, even though I only have 44, most of the time I only have 45 minutes. But what they can take from that is for me sometimes so astonishing, exactly because of that.
Mm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also exciting as well because it's not necessarily visible to a common audience member who might be watching a performance. But when you're a musician yourself and you understand also the emotion in the piece of music that a performer wants to convey, you
Right.
can feel, right? You can feel
Right.
how the performer is entering in or not into
It's
Mm,
not,
that
and it's not,
emotion.
it's, yeah, right. It's not about relaxing when you're doing the music. It's about connecting with your emotion and your feelings and what the music is
right,
saying. So it's not
right.
like you're trying to tune out, you're trying to tune in.
Hmm.
Mm,
Yeah, and so that's a really important thing to understand. A lot of times people think of breathing as a way of kind of disconnecting from things. This is a way of connecting with things. Breathing for connecting, not for
Hmm.
stepping away from something that's stressful, but moving towards something that's exciting.
yeah,
Yeah, so
That's
important.
really
And
important
hmm
because too much of the time we focus on the the deactivation side of things. I mean, it's all about stress, all about relaxation, all about that kind of thing. Whereas so much of life, we hope is focused on the positive and moving into that space
yeah,
efficiently and effectively and creatively. And so that's how we're looking at breathing
mm,
here is to facilitate that so that at least they're linked together properly. You don't want to be compromising in a respiration that removes you from your ability to connect with the emotions that you want to be there.
hmm
right, right. I mean, it has the capacity to do very things for us, right? I mean, that's when we're in the act of working as musicians, right? Creating music. And at the same time, if you have this, profession that takes you to a point where you're stressed out, then you might need also to utilize, or to find the calm and to find the peace in the breath also, right? For yourself. Like this student I was just sharing the data from. So I think, yeah, I think that's very good. That's a very good example for talking about these various possibilities that we can find in the breath. And this student of mine, and that's Peter. You were asking about my personal process, right? That I was feeling like my diaphragm is kind of unstable, and I want to be more stable. And that also I've seen that with the students when they talk about, they getting tense in the belly and the breathing gets higher and higher. And that is something that happens a lot to Viennese horn players because that instrument is such a delicate instrument. And the thing is really about being so visible because every I once, I think, mentioned that the ancient Greek, they located the soul in the diaphragm. And for example, when you listen to a horn concert, I was listening to Mozart's first horn concert just before, and you can really, it's like you look into the soul of that musician that plays that horn, right? Because as a musician, you feel so this makes you very, very vulnerable. And that's what I realized in where my own problems as a trumpet player were coming from, is that, working with that vulnerability and working with that visibility. And that's where I think performance anxiety is something that is not just it's particularly interesting when it comes to music. It's so much more interesting. It comes to public speaking. It's so showing emotions. Who doesn't have challenges in our cultures today not to show emotions? I have so many clients coming for health issues, and who have problems with being in contact and showing their emotions. So it's this aspect of visibility that is connected in a way with the diaphragm, and that can be that is interesting also when it
That's
comes
something
to.
so interesting about breathing as a behavior, is that it is a metaphor for so many things. It's central to life, and at least here. And whatever you call respiration, maybe it's something different somewhere else, not even oxygen. But it's central to the existence of every cell in our bodies, that respiration be optimal. In most cases, not necessarily always. But it becomes a place where you can think about your life as a person. It's a metaphor, the breathing itself. So when you experience breathing a certain way, it's a statement about how you're living, or it's a statement about life. And so it becomes much more powerful than just a physiological happening. It has meaning in it, the experience of it, like anything else, the experience of doing it, or the experience of its happening. And it's happening everywhere. And the impact, the effects of it that you can experience become a metaphor for all kinds of things we could talk about. And so in music, here you have this expression of, emotion and a whole. I mean, you listen to a symphony or something. I mean, it's filled with all kinds of storytelling, not just on a cognitive level, but on an emotional level. So, and the breathing just factors into that. I think it's really fascinating. One thing we haven't talked about, we don't have time for, is I'm really interested in singing. Breathing and singing. We had an opera singer who came through our master's degree program quite a few years ago, our master's program in applied breathing sciences. And she said, she communicated to us how often opera singers have real serious problems around breathing. And she, in fact, when we first met her, came here to Santa Fe, and this is a big opera center, and she was a well-known opera singer playing in major locations. And she took us to the opera. She literally took us to the opera. It was a group of us. We went to this big opera hall, and we had dinner, and she told us all about the opera, what to expect, what the story was, what all the emotions were, all these different things. And then after the opera, we went out again and talked about everything. And she had been the star in that opera in San Francisco. So she knew an awful lot about it. So we talked about breathing in that context. It was fascinating.
And Peter, I think that takes me to another myth that is very common around musicians, and especially when it comes to wind instruments. And that shifts the attention from breathing being life, or breathing being the experience, and already part of the artistic act is that you have to work on the volume of your breath. So it's this instrumental aspect, like with the relation with the body, you have to, the body has to allow you to do what you can do because you practiced at home, but suddenly your body is working against you when you're on stage and when you're playing in the orchestra or whatever, right? But so there are these myths. One is that, like, and one of them is, and I still have teachers at colleagues from the university that when I talk to them about breathing, it's very, very hard to understand for them what I'm doing, because for them breathing is only about the capacity to overcome the limitation of filling your lungs and lasting over a longer phase and being this very they have there is this very instrumental understanding that is causing problems rather than solving problems, all kinds of problems. And we have now at the Music and Arts University of the City of Vienna, we are going to have a competence center for health of musicians. So this is kind of where also breathing enters the stage, because normally it's very, very rarely seen as something that you should deal with. So I think it's one of the things is to bring the awareness of how important it is in all kinds of ways. And one of the ways is the health of musicians, which is increasingly becoming an issue and increasingly becoming getting attention. So
when you say health, what does that include?
well, health does include that, the muscular problem. If you play the violin, all that problems that result from having to do the same movements, all the time.
Like in the hand, for example.
Right.
That kind of thing. And of course, breathing can be very involved in that, because if there is overventilation, you're going to get tetany. For example, in the fingers, even though it may be mild for a violin player, that's horrific. I mean, that's a disaster. For me or for you, a little bit of tetany isn't going to hurt us.
Mm.
But for them, that disables them in a sense. That little extra edge with that incredible talent that they have in moving their fingers and so on. It's like carpal tunnel, type thing.
Exactly. I mean, injuries for dancers, there is all kinds of taping, physical therapy now for musicians and all these kinds of, it's that kind of thing. Also, mental training is a big thing, as for like overcoming stress and performance issues. And I think breathing is, often students know, they come and say, okay, I'm doing Wim Hof breathing or other things, and they want to get my view on that. So there is a lot of people who use breathing techniques, especially in the singing world. And I think it's so important to bring breathing science to
Integrate knowledge
music.
of respiration with it, because that gets left out. Basically, talk all about breathing, but nothing about respiration. So someone who does have tetany isn't even recognized as anything that could possibly have anything to do with breathing, which of course it can produce tetany in seconds, serious tetany. And then, and you lose perspective on when you compromise respiration, what it does to your not only your mental faculties, but your physical abilities to even move those fingers. When get into all the physiology of what happens when you compromise respiration, and then not being aware of it when it's actually interacting with what's going on, and then blaming these negative kinds of effects that you're focused on something else that has nothing to do with really what's bringing about the problem. That is some kind of shift in the breathing, where you get these immediate kinds of shifts in physiology. But anyway, fascinating. That's really interesting what you started off with today about the relaxation of the inhale, allowing the inhale. I thought that was really important to understand. Anyway, we're coming near the end of today, so anything are you going to finish up with us on that you want to say, or Sandra, is there something
Well,
maybe
I'm
that,
I'm passing the baton to Wolf because this is just such a great topic. So if there is anything else you
well,
want
it's
to share
fascinating.
before we close, that would be great to hear.
I think we have touched on many things, and for me, this is a learning process. Musicians, sometimes I have musicians that come to my office and work with me, but most of the time, I work with musicians at the university. So it's not my most important audience and my most important group of people I work with, but it's a very interesting one, and I'm really excited to work with them. And so it's for me, it's also a learning process, and yeah, it was nice for me for Peter to have, Peter was like, okay, you're going to talk about music, and I didn't, I was not putting myself on the list, but Peter was like, you should talk about music. And for me, that was also nice because thinking about that, preparing for that podcast today I really enjoyed that. And I feel like I learned things about myself that are valuable and interesting. And I will bring that back to my clients and to my next classes and to my work with the students. So thank you very much for having me today and for the
Well,
discussion.
thank you.
And
We all learned something for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's so exciting about being involved in the area of breathing science. That almost every time a bunch of us get together, including just meeting with a client, we learn so much. And I mean, clients always shock me. Like I've never thought of what they're talking about before. It's extremely common. I remember this one time. This woman I was working with, she was with the New Zealand Special Forces, and we discovered, why she was breathing the way that she was, is that she would shift into her chest to breathe, and we couldn't figure out why she would do this. This is uh, it was we're looking at the psychology of the breathing. What's involved when people breathe in their chest? A lot of people will say to you, they breathe in the chest because they actually feel a lot freer. They feel free. Where, physically they're not freer. They're more confined breathing in the chest, but they experience themselves as feeling freer. And so they breathe there. They breathe that way because they feel like they can get away from the claustrophobia they're experiencing, which would seem, you know, uh, just a paradox in thinking, really. I mean, breathing in the chest is really getting yourself to a claustrophobic place, but not for them. But this woman, she breathed in the chest because when she breathed in the diaphragm, she could feel her heart. She could feel her heart beating, and that scared the hell out of her. She'd go right into her chest, and she'd feel so relaxed and so calm because she could get away from her heartbeat. That kind of threw me for a loop. I never would have thought of that. And so, we come across these things all the time, these really interesting kinds of reports that people have about why they're doing what they're doing and how it makes them feel. And so it's so important to focus on what people are feeling, not just what they're doing. And a lot of people do breathing work, they overlook that. It's about the feeling of it that has a lot to do with why the person is breathing the way they are. And that's part of the psychophysiology of breathing. You have to look at the psychology of breathing, not just the physiology of it, to understand what's going on, or why someone may persist in something that's self-defeating. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway,
Yeah, what you're sharing, Peter, and what Wolf was, this whole focus is something that's arising for me and probably a lot of listeners as well, is when you think about learning a piece of music and your body is also an instrument to convey that piece of music, and then entering into the psychology of what was the what was the composer's intention? How do I want to convey this piece of music? How is the conductor wanting us to move as a group into this piece of music? And all these different psychological components, and learning at that stage in one's life where you're moving out of, for example, at university, often you're coming into early adulthood, so you're maturating into your body. So whatever behaviors you've learned prior to university, you're bringing with you and learning. It's a great time for learning new behaviors, or how do I want to experience music through my body in a way where I can do it for a lifetime, because oftentimes people who are studying music, that's they're thinking lifetime, or they're going to be entering into it in a more full-time manner as a part of their life and their way of communicating and living in the world. So there's a wonderful opportunity to explore myths and habits and learning how to be in the body while you're performing a body of music in a composition that's a body of people. There's all these wonderful layers of entering into the psychology of, and how do I want to become through this music as I'm a deliverer of the of this piece to listeners. So it's quite rich, and it's a great opportunity, like we were touching on what Wolf was sharing about moving into, we didn't mention flow state, but as a, how do I want to move basically? And how can I move and be the most healthy in my body so I can do this for a long period of time with my music? And breath is such a incredible flow opportunity, because it is so fluid and so ever changing in the moment. Just as, in a way, playing chords and shifting chords, and how can you navigate through that with breath and understanding the science and your own body in the process, so that you can really be empowered to be an instrument that you want to be in life. So it's quite rich and exciting. So I'm really glad that you were able to share some data, so you could show us some very specific targeted content that you might never see if you were observing somebody. So that's really exciting, with having the data to actually measure the breath, and then being able to explore the nuances of it rather than through technique per se, even though, it's just learning about the body, really learning about how do I convey in this form with breath. Um, so in a way, you're shifting from a certain academic technique-y, this is, the field of music, into this is my field of music and my body, and all the artists throughout time that you get to study and learn about what they were conveying and the psychology of that. It's so rich. So I'm really appreciating that you were able to share as much as you have in this short period of time. It
Well,
just opens a lot of doors.
those of you who didn't know, Sandra was a well-known painter. I mean, she has a very strong background in art. She got her master's from Pratt in New York City, and went on to become a real major figure in the genre of fantastic realism for many years. And so living here in Santa Fe is, of course, an art community, number one in North America. So she's bringing part of Santa Fe to you all, as well as her background in art. So
Well, but a lot of us
that's
have been
great
exposed.
comments. Great,
A lot
yeah,
of us have been exposed to the arts as, from young people. And if we're
yeah.
fortunate, we get to have that experience as we develop into our adulthood and beyond. So it's a great living experience to enter into. And I used to sing also. used to sing and perform, and Peter used to do theater. So and most of us have. So we know
Mm,
that feeling of
mm,
how amazing it is to be a vehicle for an
mm,
art form, and then to be able to learn about our own bodies so we can sustain in a way that allows us to flourish. And breath is an incredible opportunity for learning more and having data. So, and like you were saying, how exciting. I mean, that the university is bringing in a whole focus for musicians and health. I mean, that's incredible to me that they would actually develop a whole program in that way.
mm.
It's exciting.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra, for summing up and for for bringing,
That's
because
beautiful.
now, like, I feel like, okay, we had to have this topic, breathing and music, because they belong together, right? It's like
Hmm.
they both connect, and yeah, that's they're both means of connection, and so bringing them together is kind of another way of enriching our understanding of connection and how they uh, bring us to life to even in even fuller ways. Thanks for summing that up and creating that awareness and consciousness for this. What I was saying
Thank
in the beginning, breathing as music connects, right? And breathing is this so strong medium of connection, and so it's not by chance that we're having um, this breathing in music. It's a brilliant topic.
Well, then,
Thanks.
and becoming the music yourself, that you are the instrument of the soul, so to speak, like so many composers have in the past in classical music. They're ensouling some kind of communication, bringing it through their form. So breath is that also, and to bring the science to that, as well as the art and bringing art and science together. So it's you are becoming. And it's more than connection, which is so exciting. And then that's a component, right? We have to have all of this richness to really impart what touches the soul. So it's quite exciting.
thank you, Wolf.
Thank you,
And
Wolf. Such a delight.
Thank you.
see everybody out there who will be listening to the recordings next time. So have a good few weeks here, and we'll see you all again. Take care for now.